clicked it. I clicked it so fucking hard.
Yeah, I clicked it. I didn't click it as hard though. I'm pretty sure.
I burst a pimple on the back of my ear, and it exploded so violently. I got scared because I heard it. Is that normal?
No, that's weird. I'm kidding. No, it's definitely normal.
Okay. I guess.
I mean, yeah, I'll be honest. I hear pimples I pop even if it's like on my arm or something sometimes.
I've never heard one before. It's the first time I've ever actually, because it was on my ear. I heard it.
Yeah.
I
Well, I think it's got to do with the like, vibration through your system, your body. You can still hear it in a lot of ways.
mean,
Kind of like how like they're able to use the things where like you can put you have the thing to your throat, and when they speak but they don't have vocal cords anymore, it's able to act as like what do you call it? People with throat cancer and stuff. And then alternatively, they also have things for people that are hard of hearing, where you can use your phone. I don't know if these are still active products you can buy now, but at one point in time, at least, they were working on products where you could actually like hold it to your jawbone or hold it to your neck or whatever, and it would relay the vibration into your body, which knows how to process the vibration, even though your ear itself wasn't working. Supposedly, because your body was picking up the vibrations, you would be able to hear it better. Like if you were out in public and there's a lot of noisy people around you, like say you're at Times Square or something, right? You can't hear through the headphone, can't hear through the speaker. So you put it to your chin or wherever it was supposed to be, and it vibrates through like your bones.
yeah, I think it's called
And you'll
air
be able to hear it.
induction. Kind of like what a lot of the earpieces are made out of for hearing disabled.
So like there's some, you know,
I'm not gonna lie.
there's some
What I
stuff to
originally
that.
thought was what you were saying is there's a vibrator that you put up to your throat that helps you pop pimples. That was what I fucking thought you were going with that, and I was concerned, but I'm more intrigued now.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, you didn't answer my question on stream. If you're a petty criminal, you break into somebody's house and you can't steal anything, you can just only mildly inconvenience them. What do you do?
Take all the toilet paper, or maybe put like peanut butter all over every one of the floors.
Peanut butter all over the floors.
Yeah, because it'd be really, or syrup. Probably syrup better, because syrup will run once to continue spreading. Point is, it would be very hard to clean up.
Yeah, that's cruel.
That would take hours to clean up.
That would take days.
If the whole point was, well, I'm saying even for a cleaning crew, even if your entire goal was just to annoy someone, yeah, that would do it. That would do it.
That's better than what I was going to say, so I give you the crown before I even say mine. I was thinking something like, I shut off all the water valves for every individual thing really, really tight so that you have to really crank it to get it back on.
I mean, that's only like 3 or 4 valves in the house, depending on the size of the house.
True. But,
Yeah.
I figure if you have showers, toilets, you got a good, decent little thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like our house, you don't even have access to the pipes to go to the shower. So you would just shut off the main. Although, to your credit, with our house, you would have to go under the house into the crawl space. So that would suck.
I need to get better at going through those. I never trust them. I'm always afraid the mice are going to come nibble at my balls.
You're worried about mice? Mice will stay away from you. I'm worried about spiders.
Yeah, that too. Usually.
Especially since I'm in Jersey where we have black widows and stuff. I don't.
Fuck that noise. Yeah.
Not a fan. Don't want to risk it. Don't like. Not a fan. Not happy.
Speaking of other people who are going to have to replace their pipe soon, how about that explosion in Beirut?
What a transition.
I need to find bad transitions.
What a segue.
I'm going to transition everything terribly now. How many people really
Trisha
enjoy
Paytas. Anyway. Yeah, Beirut. That was. I honestly didn't believe it was real for the first 20 minutes or so. The first one I saw, I think, was Kavos tweeted out. And then I started seeing other places, about 20 minutes later, pop up in my feed left and right with different angles of that explosion. And the first time I watched the first clip of it, I didn't even wait till the end of the video because I didn't know there was a second explosion coming. I was like, oh man, that's a lot of, that doesn't look good. That's a building fire. That doesn't look great. There's some sparks flying. There's electrical fire or something in there too. That's not good. So I clicked off. I'm like, that's a shame. I don't know why they're acting like it's that big a deal.
Yeah.
Because he was like, holy F or whatever. And I was like, that's just a building fire. It's not good, but it's just a warehouse. 20 minutes later, I see somebody talking about how big the explosion was. I'm like, it wasn't. What explosion? And then it freaked me out watching it. And it's been crazy seeing all the wedding videos and stuff that were happening at the very moment of the explosion.
Yeah, that was weird.
Blows my mind. I've seen three separate.
Three
separate.
Damn.
Yeah. Because there was a guy that was taking video of the bride, right?
I saw two of them. Yeah.
There was a guy taking just video of the bride. Now, if he was taking pictures and video, I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he was clearly doing the action of taking the video, whether it was doing video for an actual video or if he was taking videos and photos at the same time. I'm not sure. And it was just of the woman. And then the explosion happened, and he ran for cover, and the groom or whatever ran over to the wife. Then there was another one I just saw, I think yesterday, where a man and woman were like together, like standing next to each other, getting their photo taken as the explosion happened. So that's two of they were taking wedding photos.
Yeah.
And there was a third one that happened inside the church. While they were doing the ceremony, there was an explosion that destroyed the church during their wedding ceremony.
Jesus.
That's gotta feel like a bad sign, but hopefully they don't take it too seriously.
No, I don't think they will. If anything else, it's definitely like the most memorable experience of your life because you can kind of, you're one of the ones that survived it. So we solidify our relationship because we survived a fucking explosion.
Well, I think they're up to about 178 dead with a couple of
Jesus.
100 injured. It may have broken 1,000 injured. I don't think it was 1,000 injured yet.
I didn't hit 100 yet. Damn.
But I know that it's a massive amount of damage, which is crazy because when you look at the video, it's actually insane that almost every video has the exact same period of the explosions. Like they pulled out their phone and took the same amount of time to get the app going and recording. Because the explosion happens at the same time and it cuts off about the same time. And the crazy thing is after the explosion happens, it almost seems like anime or something because there's just this uprising of dust, right? And it's just continuous. It feels like it goes on forever where there's this continuous geyser of dust and smoke that is just skyrocketing real fast.
Yeah.
And none of these videos show all the way to the end of that period of time, so it looks like it just continues just shooting up in the air.
Yeah. I think they said there was like, what, 2,200 tons or something like that?
2,700 tons, yes, of something sodium, I think? I can't remember exactly. Nitrate.
Or sodium nitrate.
It was sodium nitrate that I heard originally, but it turns out it was ammonium nitrate.
Ammonium nitrate.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, it was ammonium because they were saying like what's commonly used in fertilizer.
Yeah, and it's funny because everybody's just like, oh, it's a fireworks warehouse. And the crazy thing is when you watch it blow up, it just looks like it's like a warehouse at the port or something, right?
Yeah.
So you're figuring, okay, there's not gonna be that much damage. They're on the water. It's a warehouse or something. There's probably a couple guys in the warehouse or on the ship or something. Whatever. It's a shame. But it's probably not that big a deal. And then you find out how much damage was actually done to the neighboring buildings, even though they don't look that damaged from any of those videos, and it's insane. The number of people that are probably just injured while sitting in their houses like a couple blocks away.
This is the thing with like, I can't stand watching some of those videos. It's like, granted, there was not enough time to react, so I don't blame anybody. But this is why you always stay the fuck away from windows. They blow inward if you have a shockwave like that, and it's a terrifying thought to just be like, what's going on? Boom, your face is filled with glass now. and
Yeah.
it's so massive how fast that shockwave went as well, which is why I was like, when I saw the fire, I was like, yeah, this is you can very clearly tell it's just like a house burning, but
Yeah.
the shockwave was so impactful that I'm like, did a bomb just drop? What the fuck?
Yeah, that was the next thing I was gonna mention was that the shockwave was so fast because like when you see like shockwaves in TV and stuff like that, right? Like MythBusters, for example. I'm not talking about like movies and stuff. I'm talking about like real explosions that they show you where you see the explosion happen in the distance and you wait for the shockwave to hit. There's like a delay, right? But this was so impactful that the shockwave felt like it was almost instantaneous. Like a lot of almost every bit of footage you saw from a cell phone or whatever right after the fact, you hear the explosion at the same time as you see it, right? Which isn't necessarily normal because usually when you're like a mile away or whatever, there's usually a delay in sound. Like the light travels faster, so usually you see it happen almost instantaneously and you hear it a second later. But it was like instantaneously, it seemed like the explosion to the sound to the video of the explosion happening, and then it seemed like there was no delay at all between that and when the shockwave actually hits people.
Well, one of the
like
things
the one guy was on his balcony. The one guy was on his balcony, and it confused me the first. I don't know how many times I saw it. I thought he was in his house looking out the window or whatever. It took me a while to notice he had like you could see a railing. So he was clearly on a balcony and jumped into a pool because his phone all of a sudden you start hearing and you can see a couple bubbles at one point. So he jumped into his pool after. He might have been knocked into his pool. I don't know. The shockwave may have actually knocked him into the pool if it was only a few feet away. But like there's reports from some people saying that their house that they lived in a couple blocks away or whatever, like that they were actually thrown by the explosion.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy that these people were like catapulted within their house, multiple buildings away. The shockwave was enough through buildings without destroying the buildings entirely to knock people off their feet or throw them across the room. It's insane.
Well, I mean, you literally saw one of the first buildings within like a quarter mile. The entire roof sheared off of the building. So I think it's fair to say that, yeah, you expect that force to dissipate through some of the buildings it's essentially destroying. But if it's going straight through, I'm not surprised at all by that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And the funny thing is, like, there's a lot of people who are like, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this. And I'm like, well, the closest thing that exists that I can think of to compare to this would be 9/11. And that's only because of the amount of damage and amount of casualties that maybe would be due to this. But the difference is that there was a massive explosion that caused this one. So visibly it looks far more destructive and terrifying. Whereas with 9/11, it was like two planes that didn't really explode. They just caused damage, and then the buildings fell in on themselves or were detonated or whatever.
No, so okay, I'm asking you because I also have not paid attention. I heard a conspiracy theory, but I was like, I didn't bother to verify the whole fireworks story thing, but I heard about this, which was that the whole thing was that Israel was suspected of having done a strike on them. I heard that theory, and like that sounds terrible. But the reason that I'm so confused by that explosion was because the first part of it, like everyone's talking about the fire that keeps like the little explosions that keep happening before the actual explosion happens. Mm-hmm. And one of the theories that somebody said is that maybe they were housing weapons somewhere there, and it was kind of like an attack thing. I haven't. It's a conspiracy. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, here's the thing with that. If they were housing weapons, let's put it this way. You're talking. Okay, what are we talking? We're talking. Arguably, it's probably like missiles, right? Those would have a much bigger explosion than those things were, and they wouldn't just be like up in the smoke of it. They would be down ground level because they wouldn't be floating through the air or whatever. Then there's the other possibility would be like guns and ammo. The problem with that logic is those explosions that you're seeing from so far away, the muzzle flash wouldn't be visible
No,
from
not
a gun.
like this. Something like that would
So-
probably be like mortar, maybe, and even then,
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying is like the whole firework idea seemed like the most plausible. But I'm like, I thought fireworks were supposed to have like some sort of visual indicator. That was the point of them. But
Yeah, those look more to me almost like electrical. I think there's just a matter of I think it was just a matter of other chemicals in the area maybe that were interacting with the nitrate. I'm not like a chemist or something. I don't really know that much about it, but just based on the little bit of knowledge I have about like how things interact with each other and stuff, I think it's more likely that that was the case. But at the same time, it is true that these were confiscated materials, so it's entirely possible that they were stored in the same warehouse as weapons. But the idea that they were like storing them with weapons that were like, it sounds to me like, because you're saying it's a conspiracy theory, like it sounds to me like you're saying that the theory is that they were hiding weapons.
And then Israel was supposedly like, oh, well, they're not properly storing this ammonium nitrate here as well, which, again, I don't fucking know.
It seems like a massive way to go when they could probably just, if it's such a big deal that they have those weapons, why not just expose it? If you have access to the weapons, why not just steal them?
Well, because then
it
you
just
would be
seems like
declaring
there's-
war with somebody. That's bad.
Yeah, but it's not like they don't have armies, right? So what would the if the army has weapons, what's the difference? It just seems like there's too many things, there's too many flaws in that logic. I could understand if they were like I could understand if there were weapons stored there because this was a place where the government stored confiscated goods.
It's a port.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the big reasons that I was like, I even gave even the shreddest of credibility to the ideas, because you're like, well, if you're a government and you have a port and you have a lot of ammonium nitrate sitting there that you've been confiscating or storing and putting there, and then you're also storing weapons, and somebody your country does espionage. They go, hey, we realize that they're smuggling weapons without actually declaring them, because countries do that shit all the time. That's not a unique thing to any one country. Then, they do the collateral damage thing, and they say, well, we have a strong... That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's way too high up for me to be giving this a legitimate amount of credible, like, argument. I'm just trying to be like, I saw those little explosions in there, and I just want to know what they are. That's all I want to know. I don't care what it is. I just want to know, is all.
Unfortunately, there's too many different variables, because anything else could have been in that warehouse, because you could have had... if it's confiscated goods, it could even include undocumented bags of potato chips or something. Who knows? I don't know what reacts with... ammonium nitrate. If ammonium nitrate reacts with something like tinfoil, there very, very easily could have been, packages of tinfoil or like I said, bags that are made of tinfoil, that when the ammonium nitrate lit and was burning with the aluminum, maybe that could have caused those issues. I don't know. The one thing is, like, a lot of people say that it looks like fireworks, but they're also looking at it from a massive distance, comparing to it being just a couple hundred feet in the air. So a lot of people are comparing the sound and visuals to fireworks, but the problem is the distance and the angle. So it sounds like a high pitched explosion, but they're very clearly not at the level of fireworks, because you wouldn't be able to hear them the way you hear them from that distance. You wouldn't be able to see them the way you see them from that distance.
I see what you're saying.
So there's like it's essentially like an argument with scale, right? So like a lot of people thought it was a fireworks warehouse. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. This is not. You wouldn't be able to see that during the day if those were regular fireworks. It wouldn't make it. It wouldn't work that way. That's not how those work. But yeah, it's
right. Well,
it is definitely going a little bit too far to make that assumption, I think.
Yeah, and I hate being that kind of guy. It's just one of those things where I look at it and I'm just like, I just want to know why those little mini explosions were, and if somebody knows why, tell me. I'll accept it as fact, because that's all I want to know. Because I don't like the idea of this hundreds of people died, possibly hundreds of thousands more probably injured, and it's just like, oops.
Well, here's the one thing I can tell you. It's the government's fault.
Oh, without a doubt, I saw the picture of the warehouse. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
That's not even what I'm saying. They've been holding on to that stuff apparently for I think it was like 2 years.
Yeah.
Or something like 6 months to 2 years, something like that. They've had it for a long time and dragged their feet on disposing of it. When you have 2,700 tons of something like that is so volatile, it's definitely best to at least not keep it all in the same place. For starters,
I've had a really great discussion with my girlfriend lately, which is, it is mind-numbingly insane how far incompetence travels. Everyone is incompetent. And when you sit there and you realize the grand scale of that, you're like, who the fuck knows what they're doing? Because we need some of them right now. Everywhere. Every country needs somebody who knows what the fuck they're doing right now.
Yeah, it's a bit scary, and I mean we're very much detached from Lebanon, so there's not really a way for us to like say, yeah, we're getting plenty of information cleanly from over there. We have no idea what we're getting versus what the reality is. I don't know how free their media is or anything over there. I don't know how any of that stuff is in reality, but the reality, I believe, is that right now all the information that we got was basically from social media and people in the government reacting to social media over there.
Yeah, their
we always have to be careful.
Free, but they do have a pretty decent country. They do not have some clean leadership, we'll put it that way. That's all I know.
Gotcha.
From my limited experience with Lebanese politics.
Gotcha. Yeah,
But,
I don't know.
Oh, shit, sorry. But in terms of incompetence, I need to move it to the next one. The greatest amount of incompetence we have right now with the mail-in voting. Oh. Okay, so you said you don't know anything about this whole like mail-in voting stuff going on right now.
Like, yeah, I haven't really followed it, so I don't know too much about it now.
So, I've said this before on my personal life and my own YouTube channel, is that I voted Trump in 2016. I'm most likely going to be voting him again. But here's
America.
why. Here's specifically the thing. Mail-in voting, I believe we need to do. It's too late in the centuries that we have existed that we don't have the ability to do this already. It confounds me that there's no way we can do this safely, properly, whatever. But now we have coronavirus and everything's shut down. And there's this couple of stories that come out. And I'm like, how is this not being covered in mass scale? So to start, in New Jersey, there's already an election that happened where they were saying there were so many forged ballots or improperly filed ballots that I think it's the ACLU called for disqualifying of the election because it was they were so unconfident with the results of the election. You'd have to look up the city that this took place in, but I'm like, okay, so we have city number 1 where they're just saying the results are too bullshit. There's too many disqualified votes. Recently, New York City had a bunch of New York and New York City had a bunch of votes in elections. The most recent story that I just read was that 25% of the ballots for the Brooklyn or Camden, I think it was Camden district, were disqualified votes because of people either not filling them out correctly, or they were missing information, or they didn't sign, or whatever, or maybe they were just not being properly delivered. And then we have this whole fucking shithole at the USPS going on as well, which that's a whole other thing. I don't like what happened with that whole fucking thing with Trump's pick and the guy trying to basically fucking destroy the thing. It's ridiculous. But we have that, and then we're just getting tons of information about possible fraud, possible disenfranchisement, people's signatures not matching so they can't be a qualified vote. And I'm like,
here's what I don't get. Why don't you just limit it to 1 vote per social security number?
Well, because security number isn't really trusted.
It's easier to get... Okay, wait. Okay, but
So
all
Social
you
Security.
need to file for for unemployment is like your employment information, your social security number. You don't need any of that other stuff. So
It's not secure though. That's the problem.
it's easier to get social security is not secure enough.
No. So Social Security numbers, as far as I recalled, is basically a hospital identification. Where you were born is how you get your Social Security number.
I don't think so. My social security number and my wife's were actually pretty close when we met, and we were born in very different hospitals in different parts of the state.
You'll have to look into it. There's a specific reason that, like, the way with the hospital identifications in the cities that they're located and such.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that if I just take my Social Security number and then I just change it over to the person next to me, or if I'm taking my parents or I'm taking my other family members' Social Security numbers and I'm just I can basically just do that as is. Now,
Right.
yes, that's a lot easier to track, and that's the hopeful thing, but it's not a very secure system.
Well, how about this? You have to register to vote anyway. Registration numbers
That's kind of what I've been more
in collaboration with your license number and your personal ID number, because you can get a personal ID if you don't have a license or don't want a license. In collaboration with your social security number. That's 3 points of identification.
No, there's definitely better ways to go about this. But that's what I'm trying to say is, like, there's better ways to go about this rather than just going, we have to do mail-in now. Everything has to be mail-in now.
Well, and that's my thing is, like, you can do anything else government related just about online.
Mostly, yeah.
Realistically, if I can file for unemployment online with my social security number and very little other information that is actually private or personal, I feel it should be pretty easy for me to make my vote for president, especially if the popular vote so commonly can be overruled by the electoral college anyway if they really want to. It really, to me, makes more sense to just do the online voting anyway.
No, I agree. But, like, I always think about Google. I'm like, Google, you think is the most secure thing on the planet. How could they ever hack that? Somebody's hacked Google.
Oh, no, they've been hacked. Yeah, they've definitely been hacked. They sell information. There's plenty of issues with Google. But the thing is, like, if you, like, I mean, I think we would figure it out if they hacked an election. You know what I mean? I think if they were fudging numbers through a browser, right? Because they wouldn't necessarily have control over the actual election process, right? So they're like, oh, they've got a browser there, so they're going through it. What can they do? They can see who voted for what. Maybe.
So I'm gonna throw in the tinfoil a little bit, just a little bit.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because here's the thing. Every company has a vested interest in who they want to be their elected representatives or politicians, president, because they want certain policies enacted the way they want. So if Google says, hey, part of this new Chrome update, you have to update. You know how DDoS attacks work, right? Like, just in a generalized sense. So what's to stop...
Flooding with packets.
Right. But everyone has these little packet bullshits on their computer because we unknowingly or unwittingly install them by accident. And so Google says, as part of Chrome, we're doing this new update. And they just install into your computer BIOS or system or whatever the fuck you want to call it. They have the ability to track each individualized computer where it's located as it is. And then because you just have their software, their programs installed, they have the ability to see where your information is. They see you log on to so-and-so's website, and they just block the information before it actually gets transmitted properly. Like, I don't think that's too unrealistic to say that's a real thing when we have the fucking heads of Google, Facebook, and Amazon all testifying in front of Congress being like, no, we're totally trustworthy, guys. We don't have China's interest at heart.
I guess I'm confused how that affects interfering with an election.
Because if you go to somebody else's website right now, like if I have Facebook open on Firefox right now and I'm looking at Twitter, Facebook is tracking what I'm doing on Twitter, even though Facebook has no interaction with Twitter.
Right, but
whatsoever.
what I'm saying is though it doesn't actually affect the election. The only thing it could do is it could affect how you get marketed ads, which is something that they've been under fire for years now. Controlling who gets what ads and controlling whose ads are allowed to run and things like that. But it wouldn't actually affect the actual electoral process itself.
Well, I'm trying to let you know is like if we're gonna vote online, we have to access the website through whatever IP address. If Firefox or Google, Safari, or whoever have the programs that are used to access that information, and they see that we want President Florbo to be the president now, and they say, well, we don't want you voting for President Garbo. So anytime you go to the voting website, we've looked at your data from the amount of data we've collected, and we see that you're probably going to be a Garbo voter. So we're going to make your experience so nightmarish and slow that you're going to be disincentivized to actually vote because it's the government's fault. The government site's so bad.
So the idea is that people would just stop voting because they don't like the site.
Well, the whole point is that you disincentivize people. If I can fuck with you...
Right, but I don't that is more tinfoil than where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to try and suggest that they would actually meddle with the actual results of the voting.
Let me explain.
You're way out in left field.
No. Let me explain. I listened to a good chunk of the congressional hearing when they had the tech CEOs actually testifying to Congress via Zoom, of course, of all things. Mm-hmm. And the lady who represents Bezos's Amazon headquarters asked a question that fucked me up because I'm like, you actually asked a good question, but her fucking mannerism was terrible. And here is the simplest way to explain it. Amazon right now, let's say, because I bought one recently, sells air pumps. They sell air pumps for 5 companies or whatever. They track all the data for who sells air pumps, when they sell, who buys them, who tends to buy them, when are they peak sales, low sales, and if it's worthwhile, because they realize that the average buyer, let's say for example, is willing to buy an air pump for $20. They have all of the data you need to figure out, we can actually manufacture these air pumps for $5, and we can sell them at $18 and undercut all the competition because that's what the Amazon Basics line is essentially. Amazon Basics is essentially undercutting everyone else's market. So Google, as we've already seen through a lot of investigative journalism from Project Veritas, has been proven to have political discrimination in their company. Like, it's proven. They'll try to say it as much as they can, but
yeah, I've seen some of the videos and stuff. Yeah.
So if Google decides they don't want certain candidates being elected, and they're Chrome, which is I think 70% of the market share of internet usage, what's to stop them from taking the same data that they've taken and trying to create you to try to disincentivize you from voting or fuck with the systems enough that it makes it impossible to?
It wouldn't be hard to figure out what was going on, like at all.
I say incompetence. It's impossible for these fucking people to do their job right and investigate properly.
Yeah, but Veritas itself is a great example of the fact that stuff comes out.
But how many Veritases are there?
No, but I mean, with that in particular, you don't need anybody on the inside to figure out what's going on. Because think about it. If that many people, because here's the thing, what you're talking about is it would throttle everyone that it believed was on a specific side, hoping that they would get tired of dealing with it and back off.
You've used
if the other side wasn't,
they're terrible.
True, but if the other side wasn't dealing with that, then it would become clear. It'd become obvious.
I don't necessarily agree.
But you agree. But you think it's more plausible. So you don't think it's plausible that people would figure it out.
Yes.
Despite the fact that right now there is no evidence or reason to believe that would happen, and you're already talking about it. You're
Yeah.
already talking. You're already talking about the theory that it would happen,
Okay.
but you don't think if it was actually happening, anyone would suspect it.
Let me present you an example of my tinfoil hat conspiracy here. And if
Okay.
at any point I'm saying something that sounds so unlogical or unreasonable, you can stop me. But I don't feel like what I'm going to say here has any point that, or, well, maybe not necessarily any point, but any point that isn't plausible to at least a mass scale. Mass scale being the key here. A lot of election districts are, well, a lot of politics that happens starts from low-level politicians. Low-level politics tend to be what affects the greatest amount of change, district by district. We see this constant bullshit going on with gerrymandering and redistributing, or redistricting. I'm sorry, that's what it's something called like that. Where basically we have elected representatives for the House of Representatives. And let's say, I don't know, New York has 30, for example, because I don't know the exact number.
Yeah.
But they find that, like I said, President Forbo and President Garbo, the two people running or something like that, the representatives in this district tend to be Republican, but they want Democrat representatives. Well, they realize that in District 1 of 30, the last elections, the candidate who was running wins by 100 to 1,000 votes. That's not a lot of votes if your district is like maybe 100,000 voters. So if you're swinging small sections by small sections, you can basically just disenfranchise or discount 1,000 votes to swing a local election in your favor. So if you can do that from the lowest scale, why couldn't you scale that upwards?
I didn't say it wasn't possible they could do it. What I'm talking about is that you're saying that people wouldn't pick up on that. That's my argument. That's my argument though, is that people would figure that out, and you said they wouldn't. But the problem with that logic is, it hasn't happened yet, and you already think it would happen. So
Because
the idea. So shut the frick up. Shut the frick up and let me finish my point. The idea. So the problem I'm trying to put forth here with that logic is that if you, one of many that probably believe this, that probably have thought of this, think it now. You're telling me that you wouldn't become suspicious if this was to come to fruition? You're telling me that there wouldn't be a whole lot more people like you that would be looking at this more closely? And then more speculation growing from that? I mean, I was just looking into a guy named Dr. Sebi last night, who is a complete con man, snake oil salesman. It's unbelievable the amount of following this dude had. And people in Hollywood apparently still believe it to this day, including Nick Cannon, although his brain cells are a lot more questionable lately, it seems. The point being, the number of people in this country that already have concerns of exactly what you're talking about, and the idea that they wouldn't speculate more if something ridiculous happened, like, oh, it wasn't even close, or whatever. Like, because if you're talking about like undermining just enough voters in each district, right? All of a sudden it starts to look suspicious when most of the country all of a sudden swung outside of its norm.
We're kind of already seeing that, though, to a small extent. We're seeing a lot of...
Right, but the problem is, you're talking about a bunch of little things, right? But then the more it scales up, because you're talking about specifically the election. I'm talking about just the smaller scale, yes. But the more it scales up, the more issues and complications that come into play. Because because all these... Here's the thing. They would have to factor in each district. They would have to factor each district and not overdo the districts.
Yeah.
Because if every district suddenly mathematically just became one party over the other party, it becomes obvious that there was tampering. Because there's no way every area of the country just all goes one direction. I mean, I will be honest. With Trump, who knows? Who knows? The things that are going on, and some of the things, especially recently, he said, are so outlandish and ridiculous that I could see Trump as an outlier, right? Because so much of the country is just polarized against him for some good reasons and some not so good reasons, but for the most part, I would say for good reasons. Now, the issue I have is if you're talking about controlling each individual district, it would be so hard to nail down the numbers for each individual district in the country, and just nudge them enough to make sure just enough Democrats or Republicans, whichever party you're looking for in particular, don't vote because they're annoyed with the app. When they could probably, I can't use the stupid app, I'm going to do the write-in. I'm not saying to do just online, because you got plenty of old people who aren't going to do online anyway. So the idea is that online, maybe booths, and also write-ins. If they didn't want to vote online because it was such a pain in the neck, they would just do a write-in.
Well, I mean, you would hope so. But this is kind of one of the big things about with the mail-in stuff that I've been kind of worrying about, which is that people can't even figure in mail-in voting right now, let alone doing it online. So there's already a nightmare with that. It doesn't matter what age group or what, demographic. There's a ton of people who already don't know how to fill out the boxes, sign it akin to how you signed it the first time. Why would online be any different in that regard? It's kind of a staggering amount of people that.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like people are just too stupid to know how to vote. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, I've never. I'll be honest. I've never voted. Just because every election has been so polarized and so full of like nonstop misinformation from both parties that I despised everyone involved. Yeah. The only one that was kind of arguable was Obama, but there was, I don't remember what it was then. I think during the Obama administration it was specifically just because I was very busy with things going on in my own life. I didn't care enough. I mean, granted, those actually let me rephrase that, because I said that I didn't vote because of the misinformation and all that. But I was also thinking about like before graduating high school, like during the Bush administration and everything as well. I've always heard a lot about politics growing up, even though I wasn't actively involved in it. So I kind of thought about it from the perspective of what do I think about these two people? But to be clear, I actually would have only been able to vote for Obama's elections and then the Trump administration election.
Right.
So like I was saying though, it's just.
We don't have to go too heavy into that, but I'm just like, with mail-in voting being as flawed and as catastrophic as it is right now, I'm just like, we need a better alternative. Online could present a better one, but it's so difficult to get to that point already.
Here's the thing I don't understand. The ballots were already written, right? When you go into a booth, you filled it out on paper. Are these not just the same things, but in an envelope sent to you?
They're slightly different, but they're about the same, yes.
So these people were just too stupid to vote to begin with.
Well, if you're at a polling booth and you're too stupid to figure it out and you ask somebody for help, they can help you.
So you're telling me people couldn't call somebody and ask for help?
Making a phone call? Fuck that shit. Maybe you got Corona on the phone. I don't know.
Who knows? I don't want to catch Corona from 5G. Yeah, my point is it seems like what we're talking about here is such a minuscule number of people who would be willing to back out of voting because the app has been frustrating, right? I mean, maybe let's say they like locked it so that you couldn't actually select the person, like they locked the screen because they thought you were going to vote the way they didn't want you to vote. But like they could only make it so annoying to a certain point before people would say, okay, something's weird, I can't use this way, and then they would change it to another browser. Here's the thing: whenever I have a problem with a website, I reload it, I try it again, and then I go right to a different browser. I have 4 different browsers on my computer. I have Edge, I have Chrome, I have Firefox, and I just downloaded Brave the other day, because for one, so I can have things logged in, like Twitter on the PC didn't used to let you have multiple accounts logged in. So now it does, so I don't need that part. But for example, like if I want to have different accounts for YouTube or Storyfire or whatever that are open through different emails,
right?
You can have them open in different browsers, and then you never have to like go re-enter your stuff. And you also have it like kind of figured out, okay, which accounts are connected to each other. It's much easier because they're already linked through that browser, all the already pre-logged information, all that stuff. And I'll admit, I may be a minority in the fact that I realize a browser might be part of the problem. But the problem I have, again, comes down to how many people are really going to just give up on voting because they've been mildly inconvenienced by it. Because they could only keep that annoyance up for so long before it becomes obvious something is up with the website.
Well, you gotta also figure, I just say that as like the first level of deterrent. If we were going as crazy as you could think of, you could do something where like they click submit and it doesn't submit, but that's, going to step level, that's 10 on the scale.
Yeah, but then you also end up running into issues of definitely like provable information,
right.
where like being able to prove that people voted or didn't vote, like provable like conspiracy and collusion, all this other different stuff that becomes involved at that point. So the problem, tampering essentially. The problem is, again, that all these people that are expecting this kind of stuff would be watching for inconsistencies. They'd be watching for flaws. And almost, I mean, think about how many elections since we've been alive, bro. Has there been like accusations of vote tampering, of inaccurate counts, like between Bush and the Obama elections? There was a ton of them.
Oh yeah, every election.
It's almost every election. One side is like, no, I don't like that. Do it again. So it's gonna happen no matter what. They're gonna fact check and fact check and fact check. So unless somebody in the government or whatever was really capable of like covering it all up, which I find hard to believe because it's so many layers that they would have to peel back, to cover things up. Because think about how many employees at Google would have to know, right? You're talking about like a coder or something that's got to be involved. At least one person that's involved enough to program the site to do these things. Then the rest of the team that operates Chrome and all that have to know, okay, if requests come in about this, just ignore it. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. They'd have to find a way to smooth that over with an entire dev team, right? And I really don't think, I could be wrong. But I really don't think that many of the amount of size you would have for a dev team for like Chrome, size of Chrome, for example. I really don't think you'd be able to convince all of them to just keep their mouths shut about tampering with one of the largest countries in the world's election. I feel like there's a lot of... I feel like there's just way... to me, it kind of comes up to... I mean, this is a lower scale, probably. But it comes to, like, conspiracy theory level, like Flat Earth. Or COVID being a scam. Because you're talking about... Like, you're talking about multiple parts of the government.
No.
You're talking about...
You're
talking about regular... Wait, hold up. You're talking about regular people who, unless they're being threatened by people in the government with their life, are... prioritizing essentially treason because they don't like the guy running for president.
I'll say this.
You're talking about an entire company of radical people.
I'm gonna say this, and I do think we should be kind of done because I think we're at too much of an impasse. But at the same time, we're not really disagreeing entirely. California has elected officials that are voting right now to repeal civil rights. If you don't think people are truly malicious because they believe they're doing the right thing, bro.
No, I definitely believe that people are willing to do that. The problem is, like I said, first of all, the guys that are trying to repeal civil rights, they're doing it brazenly. I just heard about, what was it? I just heard somewhere recently. I haven't looked into it, but I heard somebody the other day saying that apparently Massachusetts or something, they apparently are putting forth actual legislation to move forward with reparations.
Oh, I think I heard about this town. Let me double check it though, because I'm actually pro reparations. I can make a whole I've been trying to make a video about that.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree. But that's a whole ridiculous topic.
Well, let me
Because
briefly
there's so
explain.
many facets to it.
Let me really briefly, because I'm pro reparations to one facet, one simple thing, is that education is generational. It doesn't matter what you say, is that if you tend to have more people educated through your bloodline, if you have parents preferably that teach you that education is at least a thing you need to do, education can only go upwards. So if you have a white family that's gone through 6 generations of being able to become educated and really getting the full educational experience, not like black only schools where the education was quality wise lesser than white schools, then in my opinion it's fair to say that you've had 6 generations of white people here able to actually learn better schooling, more schooling focused principles towards the families, and then you have black families over here which are like, I'm struggling to survive because I can't get a fucking house. I'm forced to live in shitty areas. The schools out here aren't teaching my kids properly. I can't feed my kids. You're at such a disadvantage. And then generationally now we're seeing black people are starting to do a lot better, start teaching their kids more educational values of the value of just at least getting an education, understanding what the point of education is. And it doesn't seem fair to me that you can sit there and say, we held you back for essentially 3 to 6 generations worth of people, but we expect you now to be as caught up as we are. I'm like, I think there's a certain point where you sit there and go, yeah, you're not being fucking held down by the man anymore. But there's a reasonable argument to sit there and say, yeah, you just need a little kick upwards to some extent to get you equal to where everyone else is.
So to be clear, you're talking about specific segments of the population, not like just general across the board reparations for African Americans in general.
Well, kind of, yes.
So we're talking specifically more about, like, let's say, not to be stereotypical or anything, but like the most common place people would go to, it would be like inner city, where the low income. Gang violence, unfortunately, tends to happen. A bunch of other things that happen in that that create other problems that kind of feed into the circle, the for lack of a better term, circle of life that is a little bit more parasitic to them than others. But you're not talking about, like, let's say a black family that's living in the suburbs of Minnesota.
Yeah,
making a good wage and going to school, because I feel like giving them that same benefit would be a little odd if they're not in that position and they're like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really, like, what's the point of giving them that benefit if they're not in that position where they don't need that leg up?
Yeah, and more specifically, for my opinion, this is more so focused on, firstly, people who have provable history of family as slaves in the United States. That's first priority. Second priority is, like you said, inner city people who have been just systemically disenfranchised through violence and, forced to live rather than trying to have a happy life. They're just trying to survive the next day. And then the third thing is just more active community centers, more engagement with your communities, trying to teach kids, like, after school programs, more community activities, family focused orientations. This is kind of bringing back the nuclear family idea. I'm kind of a fan of. I heard an argument towards that, and I'm like, there seems to be some valid points in there.
Because I'm actually a little closer to you on that than I thought. Because typically when you hear people talk about reparations, they're talking about, like,
here's $500 every week. Yeah, no, that's
well, not only that, they're typically talking about, like especially regarding reparations. Here, I'm gonna take this off. Stop the joke of this stupid crap.
America.
A lot of times when people are talking about reparations, they're talking about things like you typically only hear of it in reference to, like, payback for slavery.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about isn't about necessarily slavery. It's more about the oppression that they've dealt with.
The suppression of information through generational.
Well,
education.
yeah, but I would classify that as oppression. But like you said, but there's also other things that you're talking about too. Like, let's say a father was imprisoned in a bad area, like inner city guy gets arrested because he was out at the wrong time of night or something stupid like that, and ends up getting sent away for some stupid thing that some BS charge or whatever.
Right.
That kind of thing as well. I was lumping that in together. That's why I was calling it oppression rather than suppression of information, because I would assume that kind of thing would fall under what you're talking about as well.
To an extent, I feel like that's more of a policing thing, but I kind of think reparations should kind of point to the impact that slavery had through the years, not just.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Like,
I'll agree with that. Although I think that the policing thing, it does play in because it is. But I'm saying, like, if you're going to go to the point of the information behind a paywall, basically, I feel like you need to go that extra step and like consider, okay, well, were they left without a father, which could have potentially impacted them? Were they financially destitute more because they didn't have a parent there? Like, what were the other conditions that were caused because of somebody was taken from their family wrongfully because of the stupid things? Like,
Right.
I think there's more layers to it that kind of go into that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like more of like a benefit or whatever, I think that makes a lot more sense. Rather than the idea that most of the time when you hear someone talk about reparations, you're talking about like just a general, all white people are offenders and need to pay X amount of dollars to every black person to make up for the fact that they exist. Because like there's actually people that believe that, which is scary to me. That's how they feel.
I have a question for you, and it's not meant to be like a trip you up type of question, but it is kind of a trip you up question.
Gotcha.
What do you think of when you think of the Confederate flag? So slavery or Confederate or like state rights?
I think of the South. I think of cousin lovers. I think of like if the Baldwins decided to make out with each other. That was the response I was looking for.
I'm envisioning it too.
I don't.
It'd be so greasy and.
Here's the thing. At one point in time, I thought I will admit that at one point in time years ago, I thought that the Civil War. I believe it was the Civil War, right? Where the Confederates versus the Yankees or whatever. At one point in time, I believed that there was more to that war than just slavery, and I stand by that there actually was, but that was much more than I wanted to acknowledge years ago because it was young and stupid. Now that not being to say that I ever took the idea of slavery or anything lightly, but it was kind of I was young. I didn't really want to look into a lot of stuff, so I felt like it was a war. There's no way they went to war over just wanting to have free labor. Come on. I don't believe that as much anymore. I definitely believe there was a lot more. There was a lot more focused on the slavery aspect because it was free labor. However, I can't remember why I got onto this tangent to begin with.
Well, I asked the question. That was why.
And but what was the question? I just remind me real quick.
Just what is the flag kind of
was the flag
symbol to you?
Now it's. I mean, so I remember why I got into that.
Symbolize.
Because at one point in time, I didn't think that the flag was a hate symbol because I didn't think that war that's all it was about. At a certain level, we have to acknowledge that most people that use it now do use it for symbolizing something typically that's hateful. I don't think that should be the assumption. I don't think we should assume that that's why the person likes the flag or whatever, because like for example, like the General Lee in Dukes of Hazzard, they didn't hatefully paint that on the roof of the car. It wasn't painted on the car thinking, hey, it's a Confederate flag. No, it was a show about Southerners, and it was just commonly used in the South. It was like a Southern pride thing, and Southern pride still is kind of a concept to a lot of people, but a lot of people do hold those other mentalities along with it. So the flag itself is kind of a hollow shell of what people want it to be. To me.
I like the way you said that.
From both sides.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Because there's a lot of people that put weight in it as like a positive, like this is our community, the South. We're proud to be Southern. We're proud to be Southern. Come here, honey. And then there's the people on the other side that see it as a blanket hate symbol. I mean, there's people that believe that the OK sign is a blanket hate symbol. I definitely don't think we should assume that people that have the flag are evil. But at this point, it's been so commonly talked about, the history of it and the logic behind it. That wasn't a 4chan meme. That wasn't like some one guy did it as a joke at a stadium or something, threw up the Confederate flag. No, there is a lot more context to why that shouldn't be used. Just give it to him. Just give it to him, kind of thing. Don't need to argue. It's not that big a deal. It's an empty, hollow thing. Come up with a new Southern Pride thing. I don't know. It's gonna make a dumb joke. I'm gonna leave it on. But anyway,
No.
The point is, I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. My point is,
I think I do now. I'm like, I think you explained it to the fucking T in the I.
yeah, there is nuance, but it's one of those things that, unlike the okay sign, where it's just like, okay, we're starting to let them kind of take this because they're stupid. Instead,
I'm not giving the okay.
Just give it to him.
That is the dumbest one. That is.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is, I saw somebody the other day actually point out that like the ADL and all these other places that report that it's a hate symbol, they actually have a disclaimer on the site that says the context has to be taken into account.
Yeah. They
will still try and crucify people. But they will still, like, ADL will still try and use the fact that somebody used the okay sign as a gotcha moment.
No.
It's
the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center has done some good, but these two organizations should never be considered as reasonable people, objective people. Let's go with that, because they do, like I said, the SP, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, they've done a lot of good things in the past, but they are politically driven, and when you become a politically driven organization, you're not as valid as a point of source anymore. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, the reason I asked the question was because going back, kind of, it ties in with the whole, what we were asking before, is just kind of like, I firmly believe when people blindly believe something and they are unwilling to consider the nuance to something. So to the Confederate flag point, my thing is to say is that I think the thing's stupid. You're commemorating over people who lost. But here's the one reason that I'm like, well, the Confederate flag, in my take of it, has a pressing point. The Confederate flag, to me, a lot of it stood for states' rights. Because I took an American history class, so of course, let me explain the textbook to you. But basically, the idea was that the reason the big spark that happened was because of slavery. That's undoubtedly true. Yeah. It's people saying we need the labor to keep our economy going down here. We can't just start paying people. We can't afford that. But the lead up that led to that was the southern states, when they were voting, keep getting voted out. The numbers were never in their favor. They were a smaller area of the United States, so they never had the voting power that the North had. So that to me is a big symbol of saying, yes, you have to have some sort of representation for all people who pay taxes. But to sit there and deny that slavery isn't a huge part of it is ignorance. They equivalent to being a flat earther. It's like you can prove yourself wrong over and over and over again, but you're blindly believing something that's provably true in this case. True, that slavery was an impact of that.
Yeah.
So my question, tying it all together, is to just sit there and go, if somebody's not willing to talk about that, consider that nuance, to have that be a valid argument or point, why should you ever consider anything that person ever says? If I explain to you how to cook a chicken breast, there's 5 different ways to cook it. There's only one way to tell when it's properly cooked all the way through, the temperature. But if somebody can't explain that, I'm going, oh, no, you don't cook it to 165. You cook it to 160 and you let it cook itself up to 160. Like, that's my whole thing with chicken, is that I cook it to 160 and then I let it rest and then it cooks itself up to 165 before I eat it. It makes it moister. That's my stupid argument point. But I can explain all that. You're willing to listen. You're willing to take that information and make your argument based off of the nuance to that conversation. Somebody who blanketly just goes, simple, bad.
Yeah.
How can you ever have that person sit there and just be like, yes, you are allowed to cast a vote the same as mine, almost, it feels like. But that's not what I'm trying to say. It's just kind of meant to be an insult. I just find that especially like you were saying with the OK hand symbol, giving people that kind of power shows weakness on the others. That you're not willing to fight the stupid person. You're just unwilling to do it because it would take too much energy.
Like a lot of people think it's it's a flawed argument to say, well, what are you going to stop going to the AMC that you see a skinhead walk into? Like, you're just going to stop supporting industries that involve people like that? I mean, but the reality is, if you're willing to give up something as small as the OK hand sign, you're willing to. I mean, you're giving up. That's a big part of the problem here. You're giving something up. You're letting them get a victory. You're letting these hateful people get a victory because they know they're getting to you, to where you're willing to stop using a symbol that means, okay, all good, fine, sweet, fantastic. You're giving up a symbol that means these positive things because some of these ignorant, stupid morons decided to use it to push hateful ideology. Which is partially insane to me, that the idea that the OK sign, because it can look like a hand sign that if you look at it the right way, it can look at it as WP. I think it's actually PW, by the way. I don't think it's actually even, because you actually have to like move your hand to go from the W to the P. So I think it's actually PW or W. No, I don't know. Anyway. Oh, the arm is the arm of the P. Okay, never mind. I was thinking that the fingers. I think it was just the fingers. I didn't realize the arm itself was the arm of the P. Anyway, back to the point. But the idea you're willing to give up something that minuscule means that they're getting to you at such a small level, and you're not willing to fight them on these minuscule things. And I realize at the same time you could argue that there's bigger things to worry about, right? But these people they feel like they're winning by getting any victory, by getting to you at any level.
I have to go into a bit of a tangent here because I agree with what you say, but I'm taking it 5 steps farther. And it kind of will transition as well into my whole like anti-war thing that's been going on recently, which is that the phrase "death by 1,000 cuts" is overwhelmingly stupid in my opinion, because 1,000 cuts is a little too many. Like, oh yeah, it's like you're gonna get cut 1,000 times before you actually stand back and go, "Hey, I'm gonna fuck you up now because you cut me 572 times." My problem is that when you give somebody who doesn't argue on the same terms as you something, they don't take it as that. They take it as the incentive to go to the next thing. Like a big thing I've heard is that America doesn't negotiate with terrorists because if you give somebody an inch, they take 500 miles. My thing is this, is that compromise needs to be important. But when we're compromising over things that are, let me put it this way, can pass the stupid test, then we're not having fundamentally the same argument here. For example, because I just listened to a Doug Stanhope thing where he was talking about the word retarded, is that retarded was a word that was born out of sympathy, because we used to call mentally disabled people imbeciles, morons, whatever you want to insert in there from olden days. So to create a terminology, we use that as a means to kind of create a PC-ism. But it still stayed within the realm of medical. It didn't go into like some sort of derogatory term. It's to say is that because retardation is considered the definition is the process of
it's
slowing.
A technical term.
Yeah, it's a technical term. But because other people are willing to co-opt those words, you're willing to say that no, we have to change the words. And I've gone so far as to sit there and say, I agree with you, but I know where the next step lies. You want to change that word, and then you want to change the textbooks. And that's me. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You want to change the words, and then you want to change the culture, and then you want to change the textbooks. So you don't want the word to be imbecile anymore. You want it to be, or you don't want it to be retarded anymore. You want it to be mentally deficient, whatever it is now, because there's 5 of them now. So then You go after the people. And okay, sure, we're still kind of having the same argument here. We're still kind of presenting a reasonable argument to say, yeah, people shouldn't use that word in mean ways. But now we're going as so far as to say that, no, we want people to stop using it, and we want people to not consider retarded people as retarded people anymore. And I'm like, we're not having the same argument now anymore. You're trying to change words that people use in bad ways. Now you're taking it to the next step and going, no, we can't culturally accept retarded people as being retarded. We need to now change the way that we behave and we act around these people and the way we treat them because they can't feel certain ways. No. We like, in my opinion, is to say that we have to have the same stands and arguments. When we give you something, they take it to the next step. But then what you realize is when you give them something, they take it to the next step, and you weren't planning that to be the next step. You weren't expecting the next thing to be like, oh yeah, we want people to stop calling people imbecile. Right, that's agreeably a bad thing. And then the next thing is, for example, I'm trying to get off the subject of retarded people because that's not.
But like, am I understand what you're talking about? You're talking about like the slippery slope essentially of. Going from like starting at the point of like, well, you can't say this word because it's offensive towards these people or it could be potentially offensive to these people, but you're talking about the slippery slope of potentially going down the road of where you actually start trying to say that there's nothing wrong with these people, like let's say a person with Down syndrome, trying to argue that there's nothing wrong with a person with Down syndrome. Like they're a perfectly normal person. They're functioning the way that any normal person functions, despite the fact that they are very clearly not capable of functioning in regular society without help. Is that what we're talking about? I'm just confused. I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're talking about, like the scale.
It wasn't. I didn't mean to go there with that example, so I do kind of retract a little bit. I'm trying to go to the next thing because words are the easy place to start off, but it's not the slippery slope that I'm talking about. I'm saying is that it's a slippery slope, but then what you realize is that the person who's taking the charge of this, instead of following the crew down the slope, they start screaming to cause an avalanche, so you have to move faster to add to emphasis.
Oh, trying to speed up. Okay, I see what you're saying, I guess.
Because, like, right now, like I said, they vote in California to repeal civil rights hiring practices. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wait. We're not having the same conversation anymore. We all agree that hiring people based off of protected classes is a bad thing. We all agree on that. But then you're saying, oh, well, now we want people to have more hiring of people who are non-whites. So now we've changed the argument entirely. And it's that little person who leads the charge screaming down the hill is like, that is the person I'm aiming to shove down to the ground so we can save the descent down the slope because I want to get there. That's kind of the fucked up part of it.
We need to gradually make these kind of changes without to avoid causing more chaos. Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's crazy to me because like you hear I mean, I don't know exactly how I don't know exactly where we stand because obviously we're talking about specific concepts here. We're not talking about like general terms or general situations.
I could give you generals. I could give you specifics, but
like I mean, I know we kind of want to wrap it up soon, but I just want to say like for example, like there was complaints that there weren't enough people on the board of X company that were of this minority and this minority. It's like, okay, but to be on a board of a company, typically you have to be an investor in that company. So you're arguing that not enough people of X and X minorities, or not enough women or whatever, were investing money in the company to get to the point where they had enough value in the company to become a board member. That's a matter of them not investing. That's not a matter of them selecting who's on the board.
Right.
Like there's a lot of people that the minute they don't see, there's a lot of people now that the minute they don't see representation, it's all of a sudden a problem. Like for example, let's say Men's Health. There's not enough female editors on Men's Health. Okay, but it's Men's Health. Do they really need female input on the Men's Health magazine? Is that is that additive really that important? I mean, women aren't typically reading Men's Health unless they're looking at the pictures, I would imagine. But you wouldn't say the same about like women's health. Like you don't think a guy is going to be is going to need to be an editor at Women's Health to make the magazine okay, because you don't need that diversity. You don't need a white person or an Asian person on staff at a black targeted or African American, however you want to refer to people. The terms like it's so iffy when you're allowed to use which terms now. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, like
I don't know which term to use there without sounding insulting or derogatory. But like, let's say a magazine directed at that specific group of people doesn't need to have like an Asian person or a Hispanic person on staff. That doesn't really make a lot of sense because they're not the demographic of the article. Now, I mean, obviously, there are people like in women's magazines and stuff that are men, and there are women in men's magazines. What I'm saying is the arguing that they are necessary to that product's existence seems like a very flawed and confusing argument to me. And when you're going to things like boards and things like that, where you're talking specifically about like women, not enough of this group of people is involved in this field. Okay, but they chose not to go into this field. They chose not to pursue that career path. That seems like a them problem, not the industry problem. I mean, there's plenty of situations where like, yeah, sure, people may be snubbed because they don't fit a certain dynamic or whatever, but in a lot of cases it seems like people assume it's not qualification over
this is a huge thing though, is that when you deride the just deconstruct the algorithm of social media, and you can find that angry people who can read a quick headline can get so angry, get the 20,000 retweets real fast. Mm-hmm. Your entire nuance there is the truth, but people aren't willing to do that because the damage has already been done. The snowball's already been pushed down the hill. Mm-hmm. And here's where my like kind of send-off type of question kind of comes into play, because we're both central. I'm a moderate. I'm not Republican nor Democrat. I'm a very staunch moderate. I made a whole fucking channel trying to explain that.
Yeah, I don't identify as either. I'm very much in between political ideologies. I wouldn't even necessarily call myself a centrist anymore necessarily, because centrist has now become its own political ideology.
Interesting, but yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily think it should. I don't think it necessarily should be. I'm just saying that like a lot of people now on both sides of the aisle, if you will, view centrism as very specific things. Same way. And so like if you say you're a centrist, a lot of people make assumptions about you. That's why I say that at this point it's basically become its own ideology, because people already have assumptions about what you generally are going to do or say.
Which, it's so fundamentally flawed. I hate that. But anyway.
Yeah.
My kind of
You're a fence rider.
Is that how... Wow, my brain melted. How can you have a society when the government, the business, the people, and the politically inclined are all on different terms? The government, I'm going to break it down in what I view it as, but I'll leave it at that, is just the government wants to consolidate its power. It wants to be able to sit there and say, our job is just to watch over you guys. Companies want money, their business first, that's it. People want to have happy lives. Politically motivated want to push a narrative. Mm-hmm. But we're all divided in our own subgroups. And fundamentally, I don't think we'll hit a point where we can bridge all of these together again until something amazing happens. And I like to think that what we're doing is the best option. But as far as we know, 10 years down the line, it might not be. So where does that leave us now when it comes with dealing with these kind of people who are blind to that.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is a lot of people now they're like it's very much like, well, now. And I'm not talking about just necessarily people that are suffering, like with the racial injustice and all that. I'm talking about like in general, people are just like, well, this is my opinion now. I saw today that they're trying to, in some areas of the U.S., they're trying to actually stop teaching history. Until a proper reconstruction of our history books can be done, because I would only assume that what they in terms of the people that are like pushing so hard for this want to do is a lot of people are now like they've reframed a lot of things that Columbus did, right, as only being the negative. They're taking away anything positive that happened regarding Columbus, because he's viewed as like a positive figure discovering America and all this other stuff. And but now you've got people on the other side that are doing the exact opposite. They're trying to take every positive aspect away and just talk about the negative to make him sound like the worst person ever. And I don't think that's productive. I think adding some of that story, sure, but a lot of the things that we'll say like like any slavery and things like that happen regarding him, they aren't necessarily important to the idea of America being found. Like they sailed to America, this, that, and the, like they're not really that important to that part of that story. They're important to a lot more of the finer details of like, how did the ship get here? Like who was the crew comprised of? How did they found the land? Who was tilling the land? Who was doing this, that, and the other? But they're not that important to a lot of the actual beat notes that are important that they hit on, of like, okay, well, who was responsible for this in this country? This guy. Who was responsible for this in this country? This guy. It's not about necessarily how he did it. And I don't, maybe some schools go into a lot of detail about exactly how things were done, so then it becomes more relevant to make these changes.
I wish we could take,
for the most part,
I
don't think it's important,
and just put that in front of everyone's face, so that you don't need to know about all of these things unless that's what you want to know. That's what education is. You can find that knowledge. You just need the beat notes. How was America's formed? Like, yes, we can talk about the bad things, but we don't need to. And here,
I will say it is I think probably important to clarify through this process that slavery and things were present throughout this history, but the idea I get from if these people they're actually pushing for history. To rewrite the curriculums and all that, if it's actually going to be focused the way I see a lot of people talking, it would prioritize almost talking about that side of things, even though what it really just needs is like, now, despite having slaves, despite having this, despite having that, there were a lot of good things that happened. And you could probably reframe it to make it seem a little bit less positive, because that sounds like there's a lot of people that wouldn't be happy with that wording. That's just off the top of my head. That's just one way you could do
it.
Godly. But my point is my point is you could still talk about these topics and just add essentially disclaimers to a lot of them, like or addendums or whatever. You know what I mean? You just add tack on a little mention of these things, because these things were not like, it may be important to recognize how prevalent these things have been throughout our country's history, but I don't think it's important to delve into like destroying exactly what happened because of a person based on the idea that they also did these other things that were at the time considered normal, while we agree that it shouldn't have happened ever. It wasn't how things were viewed at the time. People were raised in this time believing these things were normal. It's a shame. It's not good. But demonizing people that did good things because they did bad things is just not valid.
No, 100% on that last part. No, I want to simplify and see if you agree with the way I'm going to phrase it. Is we have a 6-month window to teach kids right here. We don't need to have 3 months of it explaining how every bad thing was bad. We know. Maybe, though, we can condense like the slavery aspect into like a 1 to 2 week thing and be like, hey, slavery was a thing that people did to like force labor to get economic growth, but they treated these people abysmally and murdered them relentlessly, and we don't want to forget that.
I do think it needs to be a little more prevalent than that, and I don't mean like make it 3 weeks. I think it does need to be taught throughout the process, but I don't think it needs. They're talking about just completely getting rid of history.
I think they mean reframing it. To be fair.
No. I actually saw people speaking about this. Like I saw an interview today where one of them actually spoke.
The one
and
guy
he said they're talking about they want history class banned in that state or that town or whatever it is.
Banned until that
until there is a fully
that was the guy
redone curriculum. Yeah. Yes, and there's a lot of people that agree with this. And the problem with this is the fact that they want it completely banned until a new curriculum has been completely done and approved implies that our current history is so wrong that we need to completely get rid of it.
Yeah. These people are legitimately
But what it needs is just, more additions to give more context to things. Granted, I was homeschooled, but I learned about George Washington Carver. I learned about I'm trying to wonder what's the name.
I'm gonna say something a bit radical here. I'm gonna say it because here's
two white guys talking about race things for like an hour. Yeah, this is what's gonna be radical.
This is gonna be radical. I'm gonna say something that's gonna blow your fucking minds. You're gonna unsubscribe from me even when you subscribe to me in the future.
I'm going to disavow this preemptively.
All of American history is wrong because it's propaganda. Because we only want good America to be taught. There's things you can't avoid for obvious reasons. So,
well, see, here's the crazy thing. Realistically, there's only so much history you can teach, and you need to focus on what is most important. So it's either you focus on all the negative, right, and learn from your past type of stuff, or you focus on how did things get to where they are, and a lot of it focuses on how things got to where it is, like who caused this, who was the first person to do this, why is this the way it is, and in most cases, from my experience, that's what our history books do. There are a lot of people that are of African American descent who were influential in different ways. Yes, we don't necessarily, and a lot of them do seem like they kind of get relegated to just that month in February where they teach extra Black history. I'm sure that we could probably do a better job being chronological with how we teach history to begin with, instead of kind of like just looking at things all across the board. I feel like maybe just throughout your schooling, teaching things more chronologically may be beneficial. But a major issue is like age of the people and when they're able to comprehend what's being talked about. There's a lot of things that people don't want to take into account. They're just concerned about how they feel things need to be portrayed, and how quickly it needs to get to that point. I think there are changes that definitely need to be made to make things more fair. But at the same time, there's a very limited amount of time you have to teach history in school. So the idea that we need to, and keep in mind, as time goes on, we're going to have more and more people in this country of different descents and things that also want that same treatment. And it's understandable. The problem is the amount that different people of different classes and different sections and races and all that want included can start to become overwhelming on the amount of educational time you have with each student. So what we really need to do as a country is evaluate what information is actually important to your growth as a person, and what information are we wanting to teach to recorrect stuff that people view or feel about how we handle things today.
Right.
And I think what we need to prioritize is growth rather than understanding our current climate. I think we need to work on moving forward more than how we got to where we are socially. Like there's things about like how did our country get started, I think is important. How did we navigate certain political things throughout time? How do we navigate certain wars? I think those things are important, because it also gives context to how should we move forward from now forward. I think that there's a lot of things that we need to reevaluate about our current stuff that's going on too.
I'm gonna just throw in my last 2 cents, and then I think we should just wrap it here.
Yeah.
History sucks. There's no fucking point to it. The 2 things, in my opinion, you need to teach
a lot of it. Yeah.
The number 1 thing is what the really bad things were, and the ideology of never again. Never again. Just that principle, for me as a person, sticks so true. But the other thing is that we need to teach is this, that how to affect change. How change affected anything. Because that was my biggest maddening thing that I realized. When I realized, if you asked me while I was in college, I would probably have identified as close to Antifa type. Because I'm like, oh yeah, people are just bad and everything's bad. But that's because I never learned the historical, just the real life impact of the economy, people's jobs, the idea of happiness, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which even still is arguable, but still, how that affects change and how it affected change through history. Those are the only 2 things, in my opinion, you need to teach through history. But that's my personal take on it.
I guess I'll give my final 2 cents. History as a class is viewed differently than it's supposed to be. A lot of people view it as looking at people's accomplishments throughout history. It's not as much about learning how things played out, why things could have been done differently and such. It's looked at more as achievements to a lot of people. That's why people are so concerned when somebody they don't like, and whether any type of people or whatever, somebody that they don't like or somebody that they like is left out. They are bothered by that, and they feel it's wrong to ignore one person's accomplishments. But if those accomplishments are small in the grand scheme of things, it's understandable that they would be left out of important texts. The one thing that's clear is that things will continue to evolve. Things will continue to change, whether it's for the better or the worse. We both kind of agree that the Confederate flag is not what people think it is. Never was what people thought it was. And it's kind of an empty, hollow shell. And I think we're a fairly short amount of time from the American flag itself also being viewed that way.
I mean, I could see that, but I'm like, I never thought about that.
Well, I mean, given that it's so long stood for the country that so many people now view as having always been specifically built on systemic racism. Once things change, I mean, it just becomes another symbol of a dead society that they don't agree with anymore.
Man,
am I wrong?
Yes, to me. Not saying you're wrong, I'm saying to me.
Right, exactly. I personally don't think it's that big. People put too much weight in symbolism. But that's what's going to happen.
I'll simply leave it like this, because I wanted to make my awesome joke, which is that people change, and change needs to be honest. You have to allow it to happen. You have to actually push it forward. If you ask somebody 30, 40 years ago what they thought of gay people, they probably all had the same ideology. I don't like them. I don't really care about them. Just don't affect my life. If they affect my life, I care about them, whether that be in a negative or a positive light. But that's called change. Now we're just like, yeah, they should do all the things that normal people should do. What's the big deal? That is such a symbolic type of thing that says this little thing blew up into something massive, just treating gay people like they should be people. So when you say the flags and symbolism are these little things, I'm like, I see the same logic there, saying these flags and these symbols are the same thing. Yeah, we shouldn't use the American flag anymore. Yeah, why did we ever want it? Like, but then I look at them like, well, maybe there's a reason we should look at it and say that what happened in the past is bad because we culturally didn't know. But when we knew, and when people explained it to us, we were just like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. Because it
Yeah, but that's growth.
them.
But that's
Yeah.
growth. That's
That's
growth. You don't need to explain growth.
But my whole synopsis is just that when it impacts people's lives, that's when they take the interest, the initiative to look into it or consider it. Until it impacts them. Like we might find out lighting is bad for us one day. I don't fucking know, whatever. And then that we effectively created a bioluminescent thing from algae or something like that. And we were like, yeah, why do we ever use electricity? We could just always use algae for everything. Like, that's just change. And I don't think I think symbols are a symbol of change to a certain extent. So I don't think relinquishing symbolism is change. I think embracing and changing the symbolism is what will more likely happen. But my favorite thing to say is play the long game. If you don't know, always play the long game. Because, you might be Native American people getting fucked over by Americans, or colonizers we'll call them, killing your people. But if you live all the way up until now, you'll one day find out that half of Oklahoma now belongs to you.